Coming up next is a fireside chat with Mr. Sambit Sinha, Partner Cybersecurity Consulting Services for Africa, India, and Middle East, EY, and Mr. Vamsi Ponnekanti, Head of Technical Sales, India and SAARC at McAfee. They will be discussing cybersecurity in digital and cloud-first world. Hi viewers, welcome to this fireside chat on cybersecurity in digital and cloud-first world. One of the biggest challenges in digital transformation is ensuring security, privacy, and compliance. The recent high-profile breaches have made it very clear that organizations face the risk of significant financial loss, damage to customer satisfaction, and market reputation. Given this, a critical priority for IT leaders and business decision makers is to secure corporate data and manage risk while taking advantage of the opportunities presented by today's cloud-first world. To throw more light on this subject, we have with us today Mr. Sambit Sinha, Partner Cybersecurity Consulting Services for Africa, India, and Middle East, EY, and Mr. Vamsi Ponnekanti, Regional CTO and Head of Technical Sales, India and SAARC at McAfee. Welcome, gentlemen. Okay, I'll start with you, Vamsi. How critical will digital transformation be in the post-COVID-19 era? And how can technology leaders continue their digital journey securely? Because on the one hand, we're seeing budget cuts happening, especially with respect to IT budgets. So in such a scenario, how do you see them going ahead with their digital transformation initiatives, yet securing their digital journeys as well?
See, digital has been the top of mind and one of the top 3 priorities for most organizations around the globe over the last few years. What the recent phenomenon, especially around the pandemic and all this work from anywhere, remote work has done is actually moved it to the top of the pile. And that's what's actually happened. And the reason for that is twofold. One, from a business continuity, it was all the more important for people to be connected and businesses to run, right? I mean, the world has to run, the economy has to chug along. And it's just not one facet of the economy, whether it is manufacturing or IT, ITES, banking, financial, whatever it is. So all of that has to chug along. And invariably, every sector has now started to look at how do I continue my business and keep it at the same level of service delivery as it always has been. And when you then look at it and how do I enable that, how do I enable my employees, how do I enable my vendors, my whole ecosystem, the digital automatically becomes the number 1 priority, right? So with that, digital has actually taken the number 1 priority from that point of view. And we see a lot of different kind of phenomena emerging from that. People are moving to the cloud. A lot of people are also trying to open up their private data centers if they can't move their applications as quickly as possible to a cloud perspective, etc. So there's different aspects and facets of digital. And of course, from a security perspective, I can also say that the kind of services that can immediately embed security as an integral part of this transformation are automatically enabling businesses to move faster to digital from that perspective. So security is actually helping drive digital transformation faster than anything else, in my opinion.
Coming to you, Sambit, do you echo Vamsi's sentiments here that digital transformation would be really critical across verticals here, and CIOs won't have any choice than to accelerate this journey?
Largely, yes. I agree with Vamsi. Now, digital transformation has actually changed. The digital transformation has changed in the post-COVID world, if you really see. Work from home has become the new normal. Now, customers have to ensure that their customers have continuous digital touch points with very minimal IT support because they're all sitting at home. It essentially means that you will have to enable a digital identity architecture kind of stuff for making sure that anyone, anywhere, anytime can access and do business with you. So if one were to look at that through that lens, what the digital leaders need to do is essentially make sure that security is embedded by design. Wherever you are designing applications, architecting applications or infrastructure, you have to embed security at the design level. And if it is designed at if it is embedded at the design level, then you save yourself a lot of time, effort, money, resources for the in the future, and also build more confidence with the business stakeholders. Last but not the least, we shouldn't forget this, that you must have a robust resilience plan also in place.
So Vamsi, while cloud was already seeing traction in enterprises, how do you see its role changing going forward? And what about data protection and regulation? How do these two pillars fit in the overall cloud strategy?
As with any change, there's a set of new compliance regulations, etc. Every time there is something new, there's an interest to be able to try and see whether it is being done in the overall purview of the law, whether there's something that it violates, etc. And digital is no different, right? So if you then look at it from that perspective, as organizations are going through this digital transformation journey at this point in time, there are newer imperatives. There's implications of that. So when a traditional manufacturing environment was never looking at passing on some of their IT functions to be enabled or functioning from a home perspective, they would have to relook at this and start looking at data and that privacy from that point of view. So that is one aspect of an organizational endeavor to try and remain a lot more secure, a lot more considerate of their data, and be in control of how that data is used. When you look at some of the more regulated industries, whether it is a telecom or the ITES economy in the country itself. Now, there's been a lot of provisions in the form of special economic zones and how you would essentially run an IT organization or an ITES organization with traditional contact centers or technical support and so on. And if you were to provide global support to them, you would have to have an IP policy or a telephony policy that would be taken in a certain geographical space. With this, even those kind of resources, even those human resources who were traditionally offering technical support and contact support are also working from home. So there had to be a temporary shift in this telephone policy from a government point of view. So there is this implication of regulatory as well as compliance needs that comes in with everything. And organizations who've got a very robust and defined data policy, understand the regulations that they have to be compliant with, etc., they have a better chance at adopting and moving along the digital journey faster than anybody else. And that's been our experience in the market as well. As we have these conversations, India is home to some of the largest ITES organizations, and when we speak to them, it's evident that when they have a very well-defined strategy with all of these things, resilience as well as business continuity plan for exigencies like this, it's always works out in a really good manner. And that's accelerating digital transformation. Again, that's what I got.
So Sambit, your thoughts on cloud, data protection, regulations in the new normal post-COVID-19?
If you look at organizations, earlier they were quite resistant to adoption of public cloud services. But after COVID-19, we are seeing a lot of organizations open to the fact that we must look at public cloud services and look at cloud more seriously. So that's one vector of it, if you were to say. If you look at the other vector, Internet of Everything is actually driving more adoption of cloud. OT, IoT, and many more such things are actually driving more adoption of cloud in that way. But with the adoption of cloud has also come the challenges of data privacy, data sovereignty, and data security for that matter. So as much as organizations have learned from the GDPR experience, the cloud service providers have also learned from it. They have adopted governance, they've adopted privacy controls there to make sure that the services that are provided are secure, safe, and provisioned in a manner the client wants it. So we do see larger adoption of cloud services as we go ahead.
Talking about security, in today's distributed enterprise model, where a large part of the workforce is working from home, the data is also distributed. But still going forward, this data would have to be democratized amongst all the employees for it to be leveraged and add to the top line or the bottom line. How can IT leaders enable this securely? How can they ensure that the data is democratized, yet it is secured?
As they say, data is the new non-inflammable oil, right? So data is going to be important, as we all know. Now, there is this right debate going on at this stage, which is data protection versus data democratization, and which is absolutely fair. There's no right or wrong in this. One will have to provide access as much as one needs to, but at the same time, one needs access to data. So that is of course there. Now, the key learning from this is as I said right in the beginning, that security has to be embedded at the design level. Now, only then data is secure. So what can IT leaders do? A couple of things that come to my mind is possibly, having a proper master data management. That's one area one should look at. Possibly look at more classification and controls. Provisioning access based on least privilege. Like these are a couple of things that, besides the fact that, data needs to be monitored actively, the alerting needs to be done, scanning and risk assessments need to be done. And of course, embedding strong clauses, contractual clauses when you're engaging with third parties. So these are some of the things that, IT leaders must do to ensure protection of their data.
Vamsi, what strategies would you propagate? What strategies do you think CIOs should adopt so as to democratize this data, ensuring security?
Pretty much in line with what Sambit just mentioned, right? I mean, it all starts with understanding your data. Now, data is an asset. Data is also a liability. As where we stand today, GDPR has actually shown that. And if you treat data well, it pays you back well. If you don't, then there's all sorts of implications with that. So understanding your data is very, very important. Understand your data, and that comes with a lot of different kinds of frameworks. Understanding your data flow, understanding the access to the data to the least privileged access point that they just mentioned. So from an organization perspective and somebody who champions from a overall data protection perspective, we look at three simple ways of looking at it. Understand your data, that is, understand your data flow analysis. Understand the business owners of that data because they have the best context on what data is required for performing day-to-day actions from a data perspective, and then define a security strategy around that. Now, the security strategy falls into several buckets depending on what kind of an organization you are. Is it purely related to IP that is specific to your organization, or does it have implications from a government or a regulatory body perspective? So you've got to have sufficient mechanisms in place to be able to govern that kind of a data. And lastly, what we've seen is with digital transformation, the data is moving everywhere. And with applications, traditionally residing in data centers or applications which are co-hosted with some of your other applications are actually moving to the cloud, data is becoming that much more democratic, that much more distributed. So, having a right security strategy that follows data wherever that data goes is very, very important. And that's where we see organizations having to be cognizant and keep putting in their investments as we go forward. So understanding your data, it starts with that.
The top priority for C-suite members in an enterprise today is to reclaim growth, get back to the pre-COVID-19 days of growth. So as enterprises look to reclaim growth, what are the risks and how can they be mitigated?
Like you said, see, the world's a different place, right? And you either gear up and start delivering your services, start delivering your value proposition back to the market in the soonest possible time, or the biggest risk that you can carry is not to service the market and be out of business. And that's not a risk I think any business wants to take. So when you then take that as the number one priority and start looking at how do you enable your business to be delivered in the new normal, you have to redefine your strategy. You have to redefine the set of actions that it takes for you to get closer to the consumer for consumption of your service. And along the way, what happens is if you miss some of the key tenets of security, it's very easy for you to launch the service, but quickly just get completely drowned, either from a compliance overhead that it brings in, or simply because you've not been prepared from a security perspective, right? Any organization that's not prepared for it could be as simple as a small spoofing email campaign. I'm sure all of us have read this news article yesterday where there is this cosmetic giant who's just been simply siphoned off for about 62 lakhs with just an email spoofing, right? And the entire sequence of actions happened specifically around the COVID time. And I've just received an email that says that, hey, I've kind of decommissioned my old bank account. Now you send me the money to a new bank account. And the unsuspecting user just raised the invoice and credited the money, and you don't realize it for 3 months since then. That's all because you've not put in where your horses are headed. You have to identify how do you enable the business, but not without understanding the loopholes it brings in, not without closing the gaps that you have to look at it. So that's where it is. Understand your requirements, identify the gaps, have a plan for plugging those gaps, and that's when you can actually adopt to this fast-paced new model faster.
Sure. Sambit, your thoughts on this? What risks do you see?
Completely,
Yeah,
completely echo with what Vamsi said. True digital identity is possibly the biggest risk for businesses at this stage, because everything is happening through digital mode, and there is no way one can identify an individual other than possibly doing through a digital mode. So true digital identity is possibly the biggest risk for business growth. And this is a challenge for everyone, to be on business online, celebrity profile, users on social media, fake accounts, fake news. They all pose threats. And as Vamsi said, phishing attacks are on the rise. We are seeing them almost as frequently as one can imagine. Ransomware attacks are on the rise. Significant rise in ransomware attacks all across is what we are seeing. What organizations are doing, they're trying to use third parties to decrypt the data, but which has been already encrypted. It's hardly possible to do that. I mean, unless the signature is available, the key is available, right? It's an year-old ransomware. It's not possible to kind of encrypt that, decrypt that. So it's a race against time there. And fraudsters are making money out of all this. Social engineering is another way. Now, spear phishing, as we just spoke about. So all these things will remain, and these will only be at the cost of business. So what do organizations need to do? I mean, all basics. Increase the awareness levels, do maturity assessments, make sure that you're having cyber threat intelligence and those kind of exercises done regularly for the organization. Make sure you have a good service provider who would provide you managed security services on real time and is monitoring your infrastructure, applications, networks on real time basis, and is not only doing for you, but he's doing for many others, so that the learnings from others can also be passed on to you as a client.
So, gentlemen, one final question before we wrap up this session. Sambit, how do you see the role of the CIO changing going forward? How do you see his role getting impacted amidst this crisis?
So CIOs are going to play a very, very critical role here, and they've been playing all these whiles, and they will continue to play significantly. Some of the things that CIOs were doing possibly in the past, like doing do-it-yourself kind of thing for large organizations, those would change to contacting specialist organizations to do it for them, rather than doing it themselves. Because their management would say, if there is a solution available, and with a specialist organization, why don't you let them do, and why are you reinventing the wheel here? I mean, that's one thread I think that organizations will kind of look at specialist organizations to take care of security. But it's largely focused on basics again. As I would say, CIOs would focus more on automation. For routine work, automation is the way forward. One cannot say that, I will do everything manual. So automation is going to be a focus. So that's one. Two, while the focus of the design of automation will be more efficiency, you'll have to design for resilience as well. I mean, resilience is going to be a very key factor there. So that's the second element that I would think. Third thing that I would think is zero trust models, or lean trust models. Those kind of technology elements, process elements would kind of get embedded in the design process itself. Besides that, it'll be all about cybersecurity surveillance on a regular basis, as I mentioned earlier.
Vamsi, final thoughts from you. Do you see the role of the CISO also becoming very important now, even more important than the CIO? Because, as we just discussed, security is going to become paramount of importance as we go forward.
Yeah, so it's not one over the other, but I think, we're at an interesting stage of evolution from an overall IT and compute perspective, that not just the CIO, but the CISOs are also getting closer to the business, as you would mean, right? Traditionally, IT organizations were more like an enabler, define a process, set a certain set of technologies and their integrations in place to enable the business, but then you had a different set of business leaders who define how their business process essentially works and subject matter expertise and not. In my opinion, what digital has actually brought into the forefront, and the last 4-5 months have been real testimony to that fact, is that everything is going to be led, technology-led business process definition and delivery. So I see the CIOs and the CISOs getting closer to the businesses, understand the business a lot more, understand how the business gets delivered or consumed at the forefront of it. So it's a good problem to have because then you're now looking at the overall organization and everybody wearing multiple hats. The business guy wears the IT hat, the business guy also wears the security hat. The security guy also wears the business hat and the IT guy's hat. So what that's doing is it's actually building a lot of subsequent strength to the leadership, and anybody, there's a natural succession that is actually being built into the overall organizations. But other than that, I agree with my friend Sambit completely here. It's all about sticking to the basics. It's all about making sure that you be able to bounce back. People who are more prepared to bounce back faster than anybody else over the last 3-4 months. So resilience and having modular approaches, and that's why we see a lot of cloud, microservices-led stuff. Security also is going to evolve to be a platform which is baked into services intrinsically, so it's no longer going to be bolt-on stuff. So I think a lot of these functions are coming together much more closer than they've ever been in the history of IT and security, and it's a great situation to be in, honestly.
So that's all we have time for, gentlemen. Thank you so much for those wonderful insights. Thank you, Sambit. Thank you, Vamsi. Thank you, gentlemen, for those wonderful insights.